everybody, thanks for joining us today, Monday, April 1st. Today's lesson is entitled Spiritual Adultery. Again, the memory verse is found in Hosea chapter 2, verse 23, which reads, I will plant her for myself in the land. I will show my love to the one I called not my loved one. I shall call those who are not my people, you are my people. And they shall say, you are my God. I think today's lesson was very interesting. I felt like the Holy Spirit was speaking to me in a very personal way and brought conviction to my life and to my heart. I hope you guys had the same experience as you go through the lessons for yourselves. The lesson actually starts off with a couple verses that reestablishes the principle that God is in a covenant, intimate relationship with His people. And we again see that God just receives the short end of the stick in this relationship. And we take a little bit more insight into His heart and His position. Starting with Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 1. They say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him, this is God speaking, and become another man, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers, yet return again to me, saith the Lord. Here God is saying, I have the legal position to leave you, because there was a law in Israel that if a man finds his wife in adultery and put her away, he was not allowed to remarry her. God is saying, I have the legal position to leave you forever, because not only have you committed adultery with the lover, but you've committed adultery with multiple lovers. Many places you've looked and seeked for intimacy and pleasure, not from me. And in spite of all that, God cries out, yet return unto me, saith the Lord. This speaks to me of the human condition, of how far we've truly fallen, that we cannot find in God the most amazing beauty and sweetness in all of this earth. That we are drawn to so many different things and pleasures, yet we cannot find joy or pleasure in having a relationship with the Lord. I continually ask God to create a new heart in me so that I can love Him the way He deserves to be loved, the way every other intelligent creature in the universe worships God and desires to be in His presence. The lesson continues on with the next verse, Ezekiel chapter 16, which again speaks to the situation that God finds Himself with His wife. Ezekiel chapter 32 and chapter 16 verse 32 and 33. But as a wife that committeth adultery, which taketh strangers instead of her husband, they give gifts to all whores, but thou givest thy gifts to all thy lovers, and hirest them, that they may come unto thee on every side for thy whoredoms. Here we see that God is trying to help Israel realize how far she has fallen, saying that you're not like a normal lady of the night, because they go in the street corner seeking who will purchase their services. But you stand in the corner of the streets with your waving your money in the air, seeking who may service you, and you may purchase pleasure from whomever you may find it. And this just speaks to the way that Israel viewed God and the relationship that He offered, in that she would rather pay anybody or anything, find pleasure anywhere else, but in an intimate relationship with the Lord. And this should cause us to reflect on what do we do to entertain ourselves and seek pleasure. Do we find our greatest joy in communion with the Lord? Do we need to look into ourselves and also ask the Lord, create in us a new heart? The lesson continues on and to Hosea chapter 2 and begins to speak to us on the topic of idolatry and Israel's fall into it. And we can see here and kind of answer some questions. What is idolatry? And is it possible for me to be an idol worshiper even today? Starting in Hosea chapter 2, verse 8. We'll read verses and just kind of break out the principles as we go along. For she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. Here we see that the gateway to idol worship is having an unthankful and unappreciative relationship with the Lord. In order to protect yourself from idol worship, here Israel was just not aware that God was providing and sustaining for all her needs. We should culture a heart of thankfulness in our prayers, and every day just thank the Lord for the life that He's given us to enjoy this day, the opportunities that are open to us, the jobs that we have to provide for our families, the families that we can have, receive and give love, the communities that we worship in together, the friends that we have, the food that we eat. Thank God in our daily prayers so that our minds can be protected from being led to think that we acquired all these things on our own. Believing that it was through my education and my wit and cunning that I have become a success financially. That is by my charm and personality and charisma that I have friends and loved ones. All of these thoughts lead us to not give credit where credit is due. And my definition for idolatry in a nutshell, as I view it in the Bible, is taking what belongs to God and giving it to anything else. Taking what belongs to God and giving it to anything else. I imagine, in this verse, it ends with saying, that they took what belonged to God, and it says, which they prepared for Baal, or which can also be read, wherewith they made Baal. They took what God gave them and gave the credit to Baal. Baal was an idol made of stone, silver, gold, and they took the gifts of God and they thanked Baal instead of God. I imagine that not too many of us have a little idol that we worship in our homes. But I do believe that there is an image that we do worship that has been a great snare since the beginning of time on this earth. And that is the worshiping of the great image of I. We put sometimes our goals, our plans, our dreams, our will in priority over the plans and dreams and will of God. And we give credit not to God, but to ourselves. And this is very important for us to contemplate. Who is the God in the relation? Who is the husband? Should we take an interest on what he desires, or try to seek what his will is for our lives? The lesson continues on, kind of giving an evidence of an unconverted heart. How do I know if I am an idol worshiper? Here we have in verse 11 kind of an insight where God says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. So we see that even though they were worshiping Baal, they were continuing to come to service on Sabbaths, celebrating their feasts and their festivals. And they were doing this because they were treating Jehovah in the same way they were treating Baal. They were just trying to appease him, trying to clock in on Sabbath morning, clock in their Sabbath school classes, clock in with their rituals and their ceremonies, so that they can kind of give God what he wants and say, now leave me alone, right? But God does not desire to be appeased. God desires to be loved. God desires a relationship. He doesn't want a payment. He wants our hearts. And this type of religion is what is described as a form of godliness, but empty of power. And we can find this principle, which I'd like to read just really quickly. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. I'll read it really quick. I don't want to take too much time. But this is it's just more verses giving us evidence of an unconverted heart. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Are we guilty of worshiping the image of self over the image of God? Do we desire our own pleasures than seeking the pleasure in communion with the Lord? The last verses I would like to share is the ending verse of chapter 2, verse 13. Chapter 2, in this portion, verse 13 and... Yes, verse 13. And I will visit upon her the days of Baalim, where she burned incense to them, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels. And she went after her lovers, and forgat me, saith the Lord. Here we see that Israel was giving their best, dressing herself up, giving her all into her relationship with the false god. What are we giving to the Lord? Are we offering Him our best? Or are we giving Him what's left over? Sometimes as husbands, we, in our relationships, or as wives, when we go out into the world, we are very polite. We are very patient with people we don't know. With our bosses, we give them extra effort to preserve these relationships. And when we come home, we give our spouses and our families what's left over. We give them the short end of the stick. We're very grouchy. We feel like now it's our turn to be served. And that sometimes transfers to the way that we treat God. We treat God like the Lord of the leftovers. We give our best to what we want, to who we think is important, and at the end of the day, we give Him what's left over, if we give Him anything at all. Are we guilty of modern day idol worship? Giving to what God deserves to anything else. Giving to what God deserves to ourselves. Something to reflect because of how this impacts the heart of God. God deserves a rich and deep and intimate relationship with us. We don't deserve it, but He's asking us to please return and engage in a relationship that will be the most amazing experience that you could ever realize. I'd like to end with the quote from the Spirit of Prophecy that's in our lesson. How does God regard our ingratitude and lack of appreciation for His blessings? When we see one slighter misuse our gifts, our hearts and hands are closed against Him. But those who received God's merciful gifts day after day and year after year misapply His bounties and neglect the souls for whom Christ has given His life. The means which He has lent them to sustain His cause and build up His kingdom are invested in houses and lands, lavished on pride and self-indulgence, and the giver is forgotten. Ellen G. White, Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, December 7th, 1886. The lesson ends with this question. Think about how easy it is to take the gifts given you by God and to use them selfishly, or even in an idolatrous manner. What are practical ways of preventing this sin in our lives? So food for thought. And this lesson is a cause for self-reflection. Because when you're in love, you wish nothing more than to please your partner's heart. Let's ask the Lord or seek a way to bring a smile to God's face today. How can we do it? I look forward to hearing your comments and seeing your thoughts on this topic. And thank you for those who have been participating. Have a blessed rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.